And with the housing market slump continuing its downward decline, is now a good time to be leasing a rental property? It's the, it's the inevitable question when property prices start to come off a bit and people think maybe we'll wait. Well, for more, Jared McCabe from Wakeland Property Advisory joins me live from Melbourne. A very good Monday morning to you there, Jared. A pleasure to have you on the program this morning, and let's talk about it. The rental market. First of all, there's going to be people out there who have been trying to save, first home buyers particularly. Is it time for them to sort of try and maybe lock in a better rental deal at the moment while they continue to save, or is it maybe time for them to look to buy?
Hi Jason, morning to you as well. Look, it is the first quarter of any calendar year is quite often a good time to be leasing out a property. There's quite often a lot of pent-up demand. A lot of people change their movements, whether it be employment-wise or geographically from a livability perspective, but also a lot of students starting at university. So there's actually quite often a lot of tenant activity, a lot of tenant demand, which means that it can have a bit of an upward push on rental prices. So if it can be coordinated, it is actually a really good time of the year to be leasing out your property.
So it's a good move for landlords now to be leasing out their property, but what about if you're a tenant? Is now the time to sort of be, I know that rents have been under pressure. Is it now time to be sort of maybe renegotiating? Is that something to look at, or is it better to not to look at that at the moment and maybe focus, if you're looking at buying, on just saving for that first property?
If you're a tenant, you're probably best to continue on a month-to-month lease arrangement if that's what the position that you're in on an existing lease, and perhaps wait until some of the quieter months of the year where you might be able to look at some other comparable rents of similar properties around that perhaps aren't achieving as strong a results. So that might be an opportunity for you to do and just continue to save at present time.
Okay, well, let's look back in the landlord's perspective, and why is it possible to still get the process wrong, and what are the repercussions, Jared?
Yeah, there certainly can be a lot of repercussions if the process is wrong. Look, things such as not having your property presented correctly or not having it in comparable condition to similar type properties in and around the area can mean that your property can fall behind what the market considers to be acceptable. So things such as paint and carpet, perhaps even window furnishings, or if you don't have air conditioning. And so if you're not getting the right advice from your professional property manager and your property starts to fall behind, then it can be a fairly costly exercise to bring it back up to standard. So continuously upgrading your property and making sure that it is in good condition is important. Having a really good relationship and a high quality property manager is absolutely vital in that process, because if you don't have that and you are getting poor advice, then again the rental dollars that you may be receiving may not be up to standard and may again fall behind, and it's a lot harder to bring it up if you start to fall $30, $40, $50 a week behind where your property sits market value wise up to an acceptable level.
Talk about working well with a property manager and having a high quality property manager. How do you find one? What is there to look for in a property manager?
Yeah, good question, Jason. I mean, a lot of questions need to be asked, and interviewing the right property managers and getting someone that's senior and that does have property management as a career aspiration. Sometimes the property management industry can be seen as a bit of a stepping stone to move into sales and into that side of the agency process. So getting someone that really is focused on wanting to be a high quality property manager and make that their career is a really good starting point, because it means that they are focused on the best endeavours, both from their landlord and from the tenant's point of view.
Right, of course, you do very, very often you see, the very, very young juniors in the property management part of the business, and no doubt you are going to be potentially interacting with them for the smaller stuff, but you still want the more senior property manager to be there overlooking the process and how your property's marketed and maintained.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it doesn't have to have someone going out and doing the open for inspections for you, but certainly when it starts to coming to analysing applications that prospective tenants are putting forward, you would want someone who's got expertise and an understanding to ask the right questions from a tenant's application process to be involved in that.
Jared, at the moment we are experiencing pretty hot weather right around Australia. We're in Sydney at the moment. It's very hot and humid, and if you're in an older property, you're probably unlikely to have air conditioning, while most of the new ones do. And you mentioned air conditioning before and things like paint and carpet. Are these improvements, as more stock comes on the market, are these improvements that landlords should be looking at being proactive with to try and attract not only a higher rent but a better quality tenant?
Absolutely right. So Air conditioning, particularly, I mentioned that the first quarter of the year can be an opportunity to achieve a premium from a rental perspective. You do need to make sure that your property is presenting at its optimum to be able to achieve that. And air conditioning in the first quarter of the year, Australia-wide, is going to be really important. If prospective tenants are walking into your property and it's very hot and a bit of a sweat box, then that's going to be create the wrong first impression. So having that air conditioning and having a property manager that's been there and set that up and had the house or apartment, townhouse cooled down prior to the open for inspection can really mean that it gives tenants a much better feel. But paint, carpet, window furnishings, those sorts of things can really give a bit of flair and a better feel and a more modern feel to a property as well, which again creates that interest from higher quality tenants and obviously the potential then to create a better rental return for the landlord.
First impressions definitely do count. I like the idea of having the air conditioning on a little bit before the prospective tenants get there, so they walk in and they feel like they've walked into a nice cool down 7-Eleven or something, so they're relaxed immediately. Very good move and a good idea. Now finally, just before I let you go, Jared, I just want to pick your brain a little bit, since we're on this topic, about how to really set the correct rent and maybe to set it up in a way that down the track you have the right trajectory in place to increase the income as well.
So having your property manager on side, as we mentioned before, is really important there. So getting them to give you a very clear understanding around what other comparable properties have they leased in recent times that they think are relevant to your property, and obviously then set up where the market value might sit. Now that will be based at the moment predominantly on the end of 2018 rental figures. And as we said earlier, there is an opportunity into 2019 to create a bit of a premium because of the extra tenant demand. But the thing to be very cautious around when setting those rents is to make sure that you're not being too greedy as a landlord, because what can happen is that the property can sit vacant then for 2-3 weeks, and any premium that you may have been able to achieve has then been eaten up by the vacancy that you've had over that period. So be very conscious of that and have a very clear understanding of where value sits. And if you aren't getting the interest in the property within the first week or two, then that should be telling you that perhaps your expectations are a little bit too high.
Jared, what's your view, just on that topic, what's your view when you've got a great tenant? What's your view on increasing the rent if you've got just a superb tenant in there and you don't want to upset them and potentially cause them to move?
Look, you always want to look after good tenants. If they're there and they pay their rent on time, they're looking after your property, you always want to take that into consideration when assessing rental increases. But you also don't, as a landlord, want the rent to be falling too far behind the market value of the property. So if you see a rental increase over a 12-month period and you do have a good quality lease in place and a good quality tenant, then perhaps rather than increasing the property by $20 a week, you might only do it by $5 or $10 a week, just to notionally give that increase there, but also to let the tenant know that you do really appreciate the way that they pay their rent and look after your property.
Small rises along the way rather than one big hit. Always good advice. Jared McCabe from Wakeland Property Advisory, thank you so much on an early Monday morning.
Thanks, Jason.
Always a pleasure to have Jared on the program.